everybody thinks that they need accountability. Nobody wants to hold somebody accountable, and nobody wants accountability. So then how do we move forward?
Ooh, this is a good one. Tanya Alvarez is an expert in goal setting and accountability, which is the key thing we need to do more by doing less. She is the owner of Owners Up, starting a program called Power Up, and she's going to talk to us about the myths and the right way to be in an accountability group, how to look for one, how to create one, and then how to set the goals that really matter. Do more by doing less. With me, Charles Alexander, for small business owners, startups, and busy folks. So I don't generally ask a ton of folks about their backstory. We just jump right into it, but you've got a legit backstory. Can you give us kind of the Cliff Notes version of it?
So I grew up from a single household, meaning a single parent. She immigrated from Colombia, and she raised 4 kids, and I got really lucky. And I got into Wellesley College, and from there I was running. And then at 25, I started my first company, having no clue. Nobody said, hey, you should be an entrepreneur. Back then, it was like you couldn't just get a course on it. And I jumped right in, and no rich uncle. And I went for it. And within my first year, I made over $1 million. It continued growing, and then I eventually sold it. And then that started my entrepreneur journey. But I will say it's one of those where I got fortunate. I learned to really, now looking back, now that I'm in my 40s, and I look back and I was like, I thought I assumed everybody had an amazing support, right? Everybody had a mother who pushed them, who was like, yeah, go for it. I didn't realize that was not the norm.
That's the exception.
And people from minorities, in the sense of low income, who go to these type of schools, they actually don't end up finishing. They drop out. I had no clue about that either. So fascinating information.
Okay, so that brings you to where you are now. That's a big point of what I want, us to chat about. What's gotten you to a point where you've become successful is now what you run, it seems like, as a business, where you're teaching people how to set goals, how to create priorities, how to be into an accountability group. So how do you teach people how to kind of navigate through the distractions and the noise to figure out how to set the goals and how to keep the priorities straight?
Yeah, first thing, we just got to say it right now. Everybody thinks that they need accountability. Nobody wants to hold somebody accountable, and nobody wants accountability. So then how do we move forward?
That's right.
It's a key question, right?
You're going to tell me.
Absolutely. So one of the things is, a lot of people, what they think about accountability is being shamed, right? Or doing something wrong, or I need to pay. Let's say you and I were like, hey, we got to do something we run every single day. And if not, we have to do $100 or something along those lines. That is only effective for so long. The moment I give you the money is probably the moment I decide I don't want to continue on.
Right.
Right. Or the second time. So how do you move past that? And everyone's like, oh, I'm not motivated by the stick. Yes. Everybody's motivated by the stick, but you just got to figure out what type of stick. So we're all creatures of we want to belong, right? So I tried everything in the sense of accountability. First, you got to be aligned on what you actually want that goal. And then second is having in a group where you're actually you're figuring out, in the sense, what we do for the Owners Up, we tried everything, is if they show up late or they miss a call, they have to sing.
They have to what?
Sing a song. And we've had people who are really good singers, and then we had to do them in another language.
What kind of song do they sing?
Usually we go with Twinkle Twinkle, nursery. And then
Happy Birthday.
If they keep missing it again, we up it to make it funnier, We make them do a Spanish. We do other different languages.
You have them do some country songs.
Yeah. I don't know. What would you recommend as a country song?
Anything by George Jones. Can't go wrong.
Okay. I don't even know that person.
Well, Google it. See, now we've all learned something. All right. So they show up. They're late. We sing.
Yeah. So that instantly gets them aware of I'm not going to do that again. They have it as a fun way. They all agreed upon it, and it's instant. It's not those oh, you got to wait for the money, or you got to do burpees or whatever it is. And so that helps out. Now, once you get that consequence going, then after that, it's the momentum, right? Now you're seeing the results, and now you're going to keep on going.
So tell me if I'm Joe Schmo off the street, I'm an entrepreneur, just got started, whether I'm a landscaper or I'm a business coach or insert thing I might be doing here, where do I start looking for accountability? How do I get it?
Yeah, but if you're starting looking for it, that's a hard one.
Right.
In many places. Usually what people are doing, so three things that people think about is accountability. They put you in a community.
Okay.
And then they're like, hey, just post what you want, and then we'll all hold each other accountable. No, that does not happen. Like I said from the beginning, nobody's going to hold you accountable to that. I've been in those groups. Have you been in those groups?
Oh my gosh, I can tell you the number of times I've been, and I love chambers of commerce, but that's usually where you get a lot of that. We're all going to be here. We're going to do our networking group, and then we're going to hold each other accountable. And it's just, no, it doesn't work.
Yeah, and I've been in groups where I've been paying 20,000 over like 20,000 plus a year, and still don't get that accountability, right? And it's usually what ends up happening is it happens in classrooms, it happens everywhere. It's the 10% of people who are always like participating are the same 10% of people who are going to show up, and everybody else is kind of like lurkers. So I will admit I'm a lurker.
Sure, yeah. You're the person on the message board that just chimes in once in a blue moon.
I like to be in a small group. I like more intimate groups. And so that's my sweet spot. So for everybody else, I don't know where people go. For entrepreneurs, you can go to Owners Up. We put you in groups of 5. And then we have a facilitator. So there's not one person who's like, that's leading it and doing all the work in the sense in the group. It's a facilitator who's facilitating the conversation. So it's not that awkward, like, ooh, I don't want to tell Charles that he missed it again. And now I'm going to have to ask feedback and I'm going to have to cringe, all that stuff that people usually go through with accountability.
So in terms of somebody finding an accountability group, what are some of the things they need to look for?
So key things is, one, look for if they are aligned with what you want to do, right? And their values, super important. Second thing is, what is a structure that they're going to do in the sense of their meeting styles? Like how many times are they meeting? What are the consequences? How is it being run? Is it one of those things where you got to kind of go to mastermind, you get inspired, and then next week you're inspired and you're all full of that, like ideas, but there's nobody holding you to making those actions happen.
So what do you see as the structure that works best on some of these groups?
So I go from the whole idea, by the way, of Owners Up is, here I was running my company, and even though I was going to do another Boston Marathon, and I know exactly what to do. I've only done one Boston Marathon. Let me make that clear.
Sure.
I still joined a team, right? Because I knew exactly what I had to do, but it's a team in the sense of other people pushing me and holding me accountable to it. I see others, I kind of like run with them. Even when it's like a long race, I'm still kind of like, okay, they're right next to me. I have a coach like looking at me and saying like, hey, like course correcting me. So I think there needs to be a structure, small group, and some sort of like KPI to track.
So you bring up KPI. That's a fantastic thing. I was telling you earlier, we have friends in common. I'm in a group coaching program with a couple of them. Blake, Molly, Blake's been on the show. Need to have Molly Eastman on here. And it's a small group. We post, we chat. What do you do, or what do you recommend other people do though, in terms of KPIs to know how we're hitting our goals or how to hold each other accountable? What are you putting it? And tell somebody what a KPI is.
Yeah, it's a key performance indicator. But now that we bring up Molly, so Molly was in Owners Up, and then Molly had all this amazing knowledge about sleeping. So I was like, hey, Molly, just start your newsletter. And if you don't, then you'll have to go on social media and say that you didn't do this.
And real quick, for anybody listening, one of the top sleep experts, top podcast, bare minimum, Molly Eastman. Go ahead. Sleep is a skill.
Yeah, that's how she started it up. And then she started her newsletter and her website, and then she started moving from there. So it was that accountability of the sense of the stick. There was a consequence. She doesn't do it. Socially, she's going to go and say that. So when her perfectionism or she was procrastinating on it, what ends up happening is that thought of, oh no, I got to go in front of everybody and post gets her to actually get into action and do the work.
So for anybody listening, watching, if you want to be held accountable, ideally find a small group. often hear people talking about an accountability partner, which I think is a thing and works better than not having one, period. But ideally, you get a small group together, not 100 people necessarily, because there's not built-in accountability. And I think we've all seen those groups where you can get into a coaching group and it's 100, 200, 300 people. You pay the bare minimum, and there's just kind of, it's almost like I was talking about earlier, like a message board. But in this case, you find a group of smaller group, 4, 5, 6 people. And then everybody, I think we're going to come back and talk about this. Everybody has to set goals. And then the point from there is, all right, you set a goal. We're going to hold you accountable to it. Here's the deadline. And if you don't, here's the consequence. And I assume the consequence sounds like it's less than deadly, but things we don't want to do. Am I on the right track here so far?
Yeah, that's what that's usually what happens. The big thing is facilitating the conversations and the consequence. Those are the two big things. And then most people do accountability groups or like have accountability buddy with somebody that they know. And that doesn't work. Why? Because
Why is that? Yes, great question.
I'm just like, hey, Charles, oh man, your kids or your partner did this. I'll let you off the hook.
Sure.
Too much about them.
Right.
I think it's a whole nother level of holding that kind of like standard to be like, no, you can't do this.
That's an issue I see with a lot of one-on-one coaching. And I'm a big fan of one-on-one coaching, although I'll be honest with you. One of the reasons I want to have Tanya on here, I love the idea of group coaching. That's why I do group coaching, have a 4-day work week group that goes all in at the same time together. Because if it's one-on-one, I can give Tanya an excuse, especially as she's gotten to know me. It's like Lane was sick this week, and Sarah, my wife, had to work on payroll for a big client, and then I got hung up watching the football. Oh, I know, Charles, you love watching football. And they'll let you off the hook, especially if you're just going to continue paying them, and then y'all can keep doing that. But in terms of the way you're framing it and the way you're looking at it, is we're not doing that. So you're bringing somebody on that's not BFF. Their purpose is there to hold you accountable. And assuming a lot of these accountability groups, they are doing that not just your benefit, because they know they want you to do the same for them. Correct?
Exactly. And the bigger thing also is when you see somebody else get past something that's a big hurdle for them, then you're like more inspired to do it yourself.
That's right. That's one of the things. Yeah, go ahead.
So it's like, imagine like you're about to give that excuse, but this other person barely like had the same thing. And then they had one kid sick with the flu and they still got it done. You can't just show up and be like, oh, well, my kid didn't have a flu, but I watched that football game.
Yeah.
Like, you wouldn't have a nerve to say that, right?
No, 100%. I agree with you. That's one of the, in some of the groups I've been one of them in now, that's one of the things you have to look at is you want to come rolling in with your excuses, and then you see somebody else who's got, maybe they got more kids than you, or they got more going on, or there's more sickness in the family, or whatever it is, and they still manage to find a way to get it done. And if you've gotten to know them a little bit, you can't insert excuse here. And that's what I've often been bad at doing. Like, well, Tanya got it done, but I think she had a leg up, or she knows somebody, or maybe she's not telling the truth, or she inherited money, or she's got some insider track that I don't have. That's one of the cool things about these accountability groups. You get to know them like, crap, they just kicked my butt. And that forces you to step things up.
Absolutely. And then with the KPI, it depends on what type of goal you're going after. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people, for example, after I just had 2 kids, like 22 months apart, and I had a C-section, and that was like getting back into shape was one of the hardest things. So instead of being like, oh, I want to lose all my weight like this, I was like, no, I just said I wanted to like be able to pick up my kids and not have to strain myself. And I wanted to show up at the gym every Monday through Friday, no matter what. So that was the accountability, showing up, right? So that was my KPI, tracking that. There's other KPIs where it's kind of like you can control. It's an input goal and an output goal. A lot of people decide to go focus on an output goal, like, oh, I want to do this. Output goals, you have to have at least enough. Like output goal is like doing a marathon under 4 hours, and then you have to figure out what that is, right? And back it up.
In that case, you're talking about using the gym as a goal. Your goal is, or your KPI is showing up to the gym versus I want to lose X number of pounds, bench this much, or run this long on the treadmill. We're tracking first is that we're showing up and we're getting in there. So humor me then. A lot of people, they don't, they just verbalize these. Do you have some kind of cool method, or is there, how do you recommend to people that, how do you track these KPIs? How do you see them? Is there a pie chart?
So one big thing we do is, as an entrepreneur, you're full of ideas. There's tons of shiny objects, right?
Too many.
So what?
There's too many.
Yeah. So we put a sheet that's called goal prioritization. One thing you have to do is figure out all of them and put them in one place. And then from there, take the time at the end of the week and then say, measure them with the same variables. So what is the effort? What is the impact? How does it align to your values? And then you have a metric. So we have this sheet so anybody can come to our site, and then it allows you to say, these are the goals that you should focus on first. But your mind needs a place to store it, or else it's going to be like, no, we need to focus on this. And it distracts you.
This next shiny object.
Yep. And then you also, the biggest thing about having somebody else out there, because they can say, this is what you're comfortable in, right? This is not actually going to move your business or move you forward. So that's a big one. We'd rather do what we're comfortable in. Even if it's crappy, it's something we know. So
that would be like if I said, well, I need to start one more. You're talking about a newsletter. Well, I've got two. Let's say I need to start one more. And then instead of, because I would be doing something I'm comfortable doing, Tanya would jump in. It's like, yeah, you already got a couple. They're not doing that great, by the way. So I'm not sure starting a third one would be good. But that's where that accountability person comes in. The other person in the group says, here's what you really should be focusing on.
Mm-hmm. And this is a funny one. I actually use the accountability group to find my husband.
How did you do that?
So New York, you're constantly having fun and dating and everything. I was like, oh man, I got to get serious. And so I was on Tinder, and when I was on Tinder, I was swiping, and if somebody's picture was off, I was like, nope, not having it. And what I realized is like, wow, there's so much bias. So what I did is I outlined my values, I ranked my values, and then I recruited 5 people that I thought I respected, they were in good relationships, and then they would have to swipe for me. And anybody who if I had to go on the date and I had to find something awesome about these people and report back to them.
Wow.
And then I had to go on the date. Like if they said, yeah, this was a good date, what you reported, you need to go on another date. And it was interesting. But what it allowed me to do, by the way, I would have not swiped on my husband. He had one picture that was off. Funny, right?
Did you say, was that part of the speech at the wedding?
No, he tells it. Everyone knows it. Because he has this one picture. I'm like, no way I'm not going. And then I went on the day and I looked for positive things. So what happens is like goals that we have biased and we just miss out because we're just saying, oh, we know best. We do know best, but we need to really kind of define what is aligned with our values and then telling somebody like what you do to kind of sabotage yourself, right? So most entrepreneurs sabotage themselves by procrastinating, perfectionism, or they'll do things that they're comfortable in and then wait like at the end of the day, oh yeah, maybe I should send some sales or marketing.
Sure.
And then they never get done.
The perfectionism as an excuse is rampant. And I get this one all of the time because and people can find every known quantity out there about this, the entrepreneur that has hit all the success in the world. Bill Gates was a perfectionist, or this coach was a perfectionist. And you start digging through, you find out, well, not really. They were perfection maybe at 3 or 4 things. And then the rest, they either learned how to deal with imperfection, outsource, delegate, bashed, or didn't do it. But that's a rampant one as an excuse. So going back to your husband real quick, what were the values and criteria you gave your friends?
There are so many. So what I realized is even though I wanted somebody who had an entrepreneurial spirit, like that grit mindset, I really valued family over that. So I wanted somebody who I wasn't just an appointment, right? Because if you have an entrepreneur, think about getting married to like, I don't know, Steve Jobs or Elon Musk, or like a celebrity. They value family, but are they going to be there all the time? No.
Might not be their highest value.
Yeah. So that was a big one for me because I was meeting very ambitious people, but that value wasn't there.
Gotcha. How do you find that in a Tinder profile?
They know, I guess. Now, if you started, like, if your friend told you to search for things, you'd be like, yeah, that person, that's a really pretty girl, but nah, this isn't gonna. And then, like, sometimes you'll look at the profile of the people who wrote something, and you'll start seeing it now that you have experience.
So how do I go about, so let's say I don't have an accountability crew just yet. How do I go about setting goals that pushes me outside of my comfort zone and then get these in front of an accountability group, or am I doing that backwards?
Yeah, so that's when you have to be really honest with yourself. So first thing, this is my process. I don't like to, it's really hard for me to think of like a specific value. So I'm a very visual person. So then I take the time to kind of like do a vision board. And then when I look at the vision board, I'm like, what do I value? And from there, I describe this vision board and I'm like, oh, these are my values. And then from there, you kind of assess where you are in your life and be really, really honest. And then be like, what's holding me back from here? And then now that you have it clear, then you have somebody you can bounce ideas off of and say, this is what I want to do. This is what keeps stopping me from doing this. And then this is how I want to go about it. And then from there, you decide what kind of goal this is. Is this one that you need to show up? Is this one that it's like you have to do an input, right? To get that output you want, like you define that goal.
Gotcha. So this, and what we've been talking about is a lot of what Tanya does with Owners Up. What is Power Up?
So Power Up is a little different. And what we do is what we realize is as entrepreneurs, you go to these conferences or you get a course, I've been guilty of it, or even these programs, and you're so excited, they teach you something. And what ends up happening is like, you're like, I gotta find the time to do this. And then finally, when you find the time to do this, you're like, oh, I have so many questions. Where do I go? You could post in that community, but you're like, it looks like everyone else got it, or maybe I'm missing something. Sure. So you start kind of going in this rabbit hole, right? And then you reach out to somebody and you're doing so much work. And by the time you finally get the time to do it, you don't do it and you procrastinate it. So what is that solution? So what we figured out is we teach somebody for 15 minutes how to do something in a group setting. Then you have 25 minutes to actually implement it. And then they get divvied up in groups so they can all kind of share. So they get inspired and then they can tweak it. And then after that, they get a playbook of how to get their VA or whoever on their team to actually execute it.
Good call. So you're doing this, and I assume a lot of this is done. Is it done through Zoom, let's say, and you've got, how many people you get, 5, 10 in a group?
Yep. Well, we do it in a big group, and then on Zoom, you break them out into 5 groups. Like
I got you, because you can do breakout groups in Zoom. How about that? That is very cool. So in there, you also teach them to do it, they show everybody else. And then the most important thing, and I love this, you teach them how to create the framework or the SOP or whatever it is to hand it off to somebody else.
No, they get the playbooks.
So you give it to them.
It off.
Oh my gosh. That's very cool.
So most things, like as an entrepreneur or like the owner, you only have to put your 20%. Like if you're running a marketing agency, think about it. It's like 20% strategy and everything else gets executed by your team. Same thing, almost in everything you're doing. It's like you're 20% of your genius, 80% is execution.
And in your case, in chatting with you earlier, you've got a team built around you. You're just showing up, not just, but you're showing up and doing the things that are moving the needle, and you're outsourcing all the rest of the stuff, correct?
Yeah. And I try to find different hacks. Like right now we're on here and I have another camera recording me this way so I can use this on social media.
How about that? We should have went live. We could have done it all at the same time. So look, we're starting to wind down here a little bit. You're practicing a lot of the stuff that I preach. However, we're not all perfect. So in the title of the podcast here, we do more by doing less. What is something right now, Tanya, you should be doing less of?
So what should I be doing less of? I would say that I love, like every entrepreneur, I love to think of tons of ideas. So I have to check myself and be like, is this idea worth pursuing? And that might be the hardest thing because like, you're like, no, I can do it all. So I'm very, very like optimistic. And then I realize now that I have 2 little ones, I want to work less. So I leverage Parkinson's law. And Parkinson's law is the amount of time you give to a task is the amount of time you're going to get completed. That's right. And that's why that whole vacation, right before you're on vacation, you get so much done. So now that I've constrained my hours, I get more creative and I allow myself to think about like, oh, is this really what I want to do? You know, do I want to sacrifice this? my time with my family to do this project. And it's a constant battle.
Yes. So that answers kind of the next question. If you and you've already started to solve this, if you do less chasing shiny objects, it was what I would call it. What will that allow you to do more of?
Spend really quality time with family. And that's the most important thing, because to be honest, right? Even Michael Jackson, a lot of people won't remember him sooner or later, but the kids, that's your legacy. They'll always remember you.
They'll always remember Blanket. Well, Tanya, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. This was eye-opener. Your music to my ears. Hope it is to everybody else's. Do you have anything coming up that you want to tell everybody about?
Yeah, if anybody, you can find me on Tanya C. Alvarez and DM me, and I can send you my goal prioritization or anything on the up-and-coming power-ups.
Fantastic. Tanya, I appreciate it. Hope everything is warm and fuzzy in Minneapolis, and we'll stay in touch.
Excellent.
All right. Don't take off just yet. I've created a new program just for you, helping overworked entrepreneurs create their very own 4-day work week in 90 days or less. Look, if you'd rather spend more time with family, friends, traveling, exercising, having the time to do what you want instead of, I don't know, putting out never-ending fires, tackling another to-do list, and checking email at 9 p.m., then go to my website, yourcharlesalexander.com. If you've created the income you want but don't have the time freedom you deserve, then this is for you. And as always, if you don't, an angel may actually lose its wings. True story. Have a great day.